Blackout Nation. Written by Scott Medbury. Narrated by Adam Barr. Episode 2. Darkness Descends. Chapter 1. Gone. Sarah woke to unfamiliar surroundings, her hand reaching for the Glock before memory caught up. Jake's room. Jake's house. Safety. Pale dawn light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across military-neat blankets. She'd slept in her clothes, boots close at hand, old habits that suddenly made sense again. The house was quiet, except for the soft crackle of the wood stove downstairs. She found Jake in the kitchen, already dressed and checking his radio. "Going to check on Mrs. Henderson," she said, checking the Glock's magazine before tucking it into her waistband. Jake looked up sharply. "Not alone?" "It's 50 yards, Jake. Across the street. I'll be fine." She tried a smile. "Make breakfast while I'm gone. Devin will be up soon, and we need to figure out our next move. Sarah." He stood, tension visible in his shoulders. "At least wait until I've done a perimeter check. Dale's still out there. And his brother's death? Which is why I'm armed." She patted the Glock. "And why I need to make sure she's okay. I'm not leaving her alone again." Jake studied her face, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes, then I'm coming after you." "Copy that," she said dryly. "Try not to burn the oatmeal." Her attempt at humor seemed forced, even to her. She slipped out the front door. The morning air was thick with smoke from the burned houses, and an unnatural quiet hung over the street. No birds, no distant traffic, just the soft pop and crackle of cooling embers. Sarah moved quickly across the road to Mrs. Henderson's house, scanning her surroundings with practiced vigilance. She saw the front door was open as she crossed the lawn, and her heart began to pound. It had been bolted from the inside when they left her. The dead cat was missing. Dark stains on the welcome mat, the only evidence it had been there at all. Mrs. Henderson had likely dealt with the cat. But Tommy Collins' body was gone as well. That couldn't have been her. "Mrs. Henderson?" she called softly, stepping up onto the porch, one hand on the Glock. "Martha?" No answer, just the whisper of wind through the open door. Sarah knew before she stepped inside, knew from the stillness, from the wrongness in the air. Mrs. Henderson was dead. But she had to be sure. She had to know what her choices had cost. Sarah crossed the threshold, the floorboards creaking under her boots. Early morning light penetrated the house at odd angles through windows and half-drawn curtains. The candles Mrs. Henderson had so carefully placed and lit were all extinguished. Her hand stayed close to the Glock as she moved forward. The living room had been methodically stripped of electronics, telling her immediately that whoever had breached the house after they left had no idea what was valuable and what was not in this new reality. "Martha!" Her whisper seemed to echo in the stillness. Blood spatters marked the carpet where she had winged Tommy Collins, but they'd been partially scrubbed. The cleaning supplies Mrs. Henderson had muttered about were there: a bucket of pink-tinged water, bloody rags. She had actually tried to clean up, just like she'd said. Tried to make things normal again. A sudden crash from the kitchen made Sarah spin, Glock drawn. Her heart hammered as she edged toward the doorway, using the wall as cover. She took a breath, then moved swiftly around the corner, weapon ready. A broom lay on the linoleum floor. It looked like it had simply slipped from where it had been propped against the table. Nothing more. But the kitchen told its own story. Cupboards hanging open, Drawers pulled out. Even the cookie jar Mrs. Henderson always kept full for Devon lay shattered on the counter. Sarah moved deeper into the house, keeping her footsteps light, clearing rooms with mechanical precision. The bathroom had been ransacked, drawers open and their contents thrown on the floor. Upstairs bedrooms were looted too, clothes and linen scattered everywhere. But she didn't spot any signs of a physical struggle, or a body. She began to hope. Sarah froze at a creaking sound above her. She held her breath, listening. Just the house settling, or... 30 seconds passed. Nothing. She turned to leave the room when she spotted something in the top drawer of the heavy oak dresser by the door. It was a small black-and-white photograph in an ornate pewter frame. It was Martha and her husband on their wedding day, young and smiling, full of hope. On the back, 1963 was scrawled in faded blue ink. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes and carefully tucked it into her pocket. The weight of it felt like a stone. The back door was open too, swinging gently in the morning breeze. Martha's prized rose bushes had been trampled, their branches broken. On the back step, a single bloody handprint marked the railing. "Oh, Martha," Sarah whispered. "Why didn't you come with us?" She stood there too long, studying the handprint. Was it Martha's, Dale's, or someone else's entirely? The questions felt like accusations. She should have tried harder to convince her. She should have forced her to come. Should have... A whistle cut through the morning air. Jake signaled that her 5 minutes were up. Sarah took one last look around, her mind logging details with clinical detachment. No body, no signs of fatal violence, but no sign of Martha either. Just an empty house that felt like a tomb. The shadows seemed longer as she moved back through the house. Every corner held the possibility of answers she didn't want to find. The morning light through broken curtains painted strange patterns on the walls, like reaching hands. She was halfway back across the street when she saw Jake tense in the doorway. His rifle came up smoothly. "Stop," he hissed, holding up his hand like a traffic cop. Sarah stopped instantly, her eyebrow raised. The faint rumble of an engine reached her ears and grew louder with every second. A vehicle. Impossible, unless... "Inside!" Jake's voice was urgent but controlled. "Now!" She sprinted for the door. Behind her, she heard the distinctive rumble of a truck. No, more than one. She pushed past Jake, and he bolted the door. They both rushed to the blacked-out window and carefully peered through the gaps in the black plastic. Sarah's gaze locked onto the hulking transport rumbling into view at the end of their street. Its shape was unmistakable. Military. "Aunt Sarah?" came Devon's voice from behind them at the foot of the stairs. She met Jake's eyes, saw her own fear reflected there. "We need to get back upstairs," Jake said, barely a whisper, but the urgency in his voice had Devon moving instantly. Sarah followed, guiding her nephew with a hand on his shoulder. Jake brought up the rear, his footsteps silent. At the top of the stairs, Sarah started toward the front bedroom, but Jake caught her arm. "Back room," he breathed. "Better angles, more cover, harder to spot movement through the windows." Always thinking tactically. Sarah nodded. Of course he'd have defensive positions worked out. The bedroom was sparse. A single bed, a dresser, blackout curtains already drawn on the two windows, one over the backyard and the other the side of the house. Gun safe in the corner, medical supplies stacked neatly against one wall. This was Jake's fallback position, she realized, his last line of defense. "Devon, honey," Sarah whispered, pulling him close. "We need to be absolutely silent, like the quietest ninja ever.
Can you do that?
Devon nodded, his eyes wide but alert. No tears, no panic. Sarah felt a surge of pride. He was adapting to this new world faster than most adults. Jake and Sarah moved to the side window. It offered a view down the street while being partially obscured by a large oak tree. Jake crouched and left the blackout curtain in place, but there was a small gap that gave him and Sarah, who was leaning over him, a clear line of sight. The rumble of the engines grew louder. Devon pressed against her side, and she wrapped one arm around him, ready to cover his mouth if needed. Her other hand stayed close to the Glock.
2 transports, Jake reported from his position. Military spec, recent models, not National Guard issue.
Sarah nodded. They were M35 cargo trucks, a familiar olive drab color. Definitely U.S. Army. Or at least, they had been. Now the markings on the vehicles were buried under rough swaths of black spray paint, the flag and insignias obliterated.
8 on foot,
she counted softly.
In civilian clothes, with tactical vests. Except for that one in the back. He's wearing a cop uniform.
Jake examined the cop more closely, noting the black eye and bloody rip on his shirt arm. Something there didn't add up. The men moved with practiced efficiency, covering angles, maintaining spacing. Their weapons were a mix: AR-15s, M4s, even a few MP5s. Not the random assortment of civilian firearms she'd have expected. This was proper military hardware.
Check their kit,
Jake whispered.
They're equipped for serious operations.
Sarah saw it too. In addition to the black tactical vests and arsenal they carried, they also wore radio headsets. Someone had either bankrolled this operation long before the EMP hit, or these boys had known where to target in the confusion post-strike.
Shit, she whispered. That one in front was one of the men who went into the hospital yesterday. Wait, the shorter guy, too.
The first truck passed beneath their window. The cargo bed was covered by a tarp, but the shape beneath suggested supplies. Food, maybe, or weapons. Then came the second transport.
Oh, God,
Sarah breathed. The second truck's cargo bed was filled with people. Civilians sat on rough wooden benches bolted to the bed, their hands bound with zip ties. Armed guards stood at each corner, weapons pointed inward. Sarah counted 12 prisoners, men and women, ranging from young adults to elderly. Most stared at nothing, shoulders slumped in defeat. Her heart skipped a beat when she spied a woman with bloodied gray hair, cradling her arm, but upon closer inspection she saw it was not Mrs. Henderson.
Where do you think they're taking them?
Don't know. Work camps, maybe? Jake said quietly. If they aren't going to use them for something, why keep them alive?
Christ, spat Sarah. It's not even been 24 hours and we've gone all walking dead.
A young man near the back of the truck caught Sarah's attention. Unlike the others, his head was up, his eyes alert. She recognized the look. She'd seen it in cornered soldiers. He was waiting for an opportunity.
Don't,
she whispered, though he couldn't hear her.
Please don't.
Devon squirmed, trying to see better. Sarah pulled him back, holding him firmly against her.
Eyes closed, baby,
she breathed into his ear.
Just for a minute.
The young man moved so fast the guards had no time to react. One moment he was seated, the next he was vaulting over the side of the truck. He hit the pavement and rolled to his feet in a smooth fashion before taking off.
Stop!
The command rang out, confident and unhurried.
Final warning!
The runner had made it perhaps 20 feet. Sarah saw his mistake instantly. He was running straight down the street instead of cutting between houses. Rookie error. Fatal. The shot came from one of the men on foot. It was the tall leader of the group who'd entered the hospital. He fired a single round. No warning shot, no attempt to wound. The runner pitched forward, face first, onto the asphalt. Devon jerked in Sarah's arms but stayed silent. She was grateful his face was pressed against her chest. The convoy didn't slow. One of the guards spoke into his radio. Sierra 3 to base. One package terminated on Palmer Street. Send cleanup crew to coordinates. His tone was bored, routine, like calling in a maintenance request. Roger, Sierra 3, came the reply. Cleanup crew en route. Continue to base. Sarah forced herself to watch, to analyze. The guards in the truck had barely moved during the escape attempt. They knew their jobs. Watch the other prisoners. Let the ground team handle runners. The survivors on the truck hadn't even looked up at the sound of the shot. They'd seen this before. The convoy rolled on. Sarah counted the prisoners again. 11 now. They're heading toward downtown, Jake said quietly. He'd moved closer, still watching the rear of the convoy. We need to know where they're operating from. Sarah caught his meaning immediately. No, we need to leave. Give me 2 hours. I'll follow them, see where they're based. We need intelligence if we're going to get out of the city safely. His voice was low but intense. Right now, we're blind. Sarah wanted to argue, but her military training knew he was right. You don't move without intel, not when you have civilians to protect. She glanced down at Devon, still trembling against her. 1 hour, she said firmly. I'll start packing, get Devon ready. But if you're not back in 1 hour... He nodded and grabbed the small backpack that was stashed beside the front door. I will be. He checked his rifle and slung it over his shoulder, then pulled a small radio from his pocket, stashing it in the backpack and shrugging it on. Channel 3 if there's trouble. These are older models. Shouldn't be affected by the EMP. The boots below were fading away, the rear guard moving on. In the street, the runner's body lay cooling on the asphalt, a dark stain spreading beneath it. A message for anyone watching. A promise of what resistance earned. Jake moved toward the door with practiced silence. At the threshold, he paused. Sarah, if I'm not back in an hour... We'll wait 90 minutes, she said. Not a minute more. He nodded once and was gone, leaving Sarah holding Devon in the growing morning light. Chapter 2. Hostiles. Sarah methodically sorted through Jake's supplies, separating what they needed from what they could leave behind. Weight versus necessity, the eternal challenge of life on the move. She'd done this before, in Afghanistan, helping villagers evacuate ahead of Taliban sweeps. But this was different. This was home. The kitchen counter was organized into precise piles: dried foods, medical supplies, ammunition. 3 bags lay open on the floor, ready to be packed strategically, quickest access to the most vital supplies. The familiar routine helped calm her nerves, kept her from watching the clock too obsessively. 53 minutes since Jake had left, and now all she had to do was make a quick visit to her home and grab clothes for her and Devon. Devon, honey, can you hand me that box of... She turned, finding empty air where her nephew had been sitting. Her heart skipped. Devon? The house was suddenly, achingly quiet. A subtle change in the quality of light hit her peripheral vision. Something was different in the front of the house. Sarah drew the Glock, moving silently toward the living room. The crash, when it came, was deafening in the morning stillness. The sound of metal on hardwood, followed by Devon's startled yelp. Sarah burst through the doorway, weapon ready. The morning sun streamed through the large front window. The blackout curtain and the rod it hung from were lying on the floor, and there, bathed in sunlight, stood Devon, one edge of the heavy material still clutched in his hand. His eyes were wide with fear, not of her wrath,
but of what he saw outside. Time slowed. Sarah saw everything at once. Devon, frozen in the window. 2 men in tactical gear on the street, apparently here to collect the dead runner. The surprise on their faces turning to recognition of opportunity. "Get down!" Sarah lunged forward as the first man reached for his weapon. She grabbed Devon by the shirt collar, yanking him backward as the window exploded inward. The first rounds went high, punching through the wall where they'd been standing. Sarah rolled them behind the heavy oak couch, pressing Devon flat against the floor. "Stay down. Don't move." Her voice was calm, automatic, combat triage calm. More bullets tore into the couch. They were trying to pin them down, she realized. Standard procedure. 1 man laying down suppressing fire while the other moved to flank. He'd be trying to get around to the back door. Sarah popped up from behind the couch, squeezing off 2 rounds through the broken window. The man out front dove for cover behind their vehicle. She hadn't expected to hit him, just needed to interrupt the call for backup he had begun to make. Devon whimpered. Sarah pulled him closer. "Shh, baby, I've got you. Think. Think. Think." The second man would be heading for the back door. They were trapped in a kill zone. A sound from the kitchen, the subtle scrape of a boot on tile. Sarah's mind raced. The couch faced the wrong way. No cover if they came through the kitchen. But the stairs. If she could get Devon upstairs to the reinforced bedroom. The kitchen door creaked. Sarah touched Devon's face, made him look at her. "When I say run, you run up those stairs as fast as you can. Into Jake's room. Lock the door. Understand?" He nodded, tears streaming silently down his face. Sarah took a breath, counted, waited for the next burst of suppressing fire from outside. It came a few seconds later. "Run! Now!" Jake crouched in the shadows of an abandoned office building, watching the convoy slow as it approached Memorial Stadium. Smart choice for a base of operations. High ground, clear sightlines, multiple access points they could control, built-in facilities. The stadium's massive concrete walls would make it nearly impregnable. Getting here had been like running through hell. The city sprawled broken around him. 18 hours of chaos written in blood and ash. 3 blocks back, he'd picked his way past City Hall, now a burnt-out shell. Bodies still littered the steps where desperate citizens had tried to storm the building during the initial panic. The police headquarters across the street was even worse. Every window shattered, cruisers overturned and burnt. He'd counted at least 30 dead, both civilians and police officers, left to rot where they fell. A makeshift gallows had been erected in the town square, with 3 bodies swaying gently in the morning breeze. A crude sign hung around their necks. Looters. Jake was shocked at how quickly his city had unraveled. The only positive he could take from it was that the convoy had been forced to stop regularly to clear the road, allowing him to keep up on foot. The convoy's lead vehicles stopped at what had been the stadium's main gate. New fortifications had been added, concrete barriers, razor wire, sandbagged gun positions. This was clearly a professional outfit, and he couldn't help but wonder how much of the city center's devastation was their handiwork. He doubted that desperate, frightened citizens would have attacked and overrun the police, even if they'd had the firepower. "Command, this is Echo 1. The radio at Jake's hip crackled. "Returning with assets from Sector 7 sweep." Jake pulled out his binoculars, studying the gate operation. 4 guards on the walls, 2 in the gatehouse, all with military-grade weapons. The gate rolled open smoothly. They had power. Probably generators they'd been stockpiling before the EMP. Inside the gate, he could see more vehicles, organized supply areas, even what looked like a medical triage center. As the trucks rolled through, a figure emerged from the stadium's main entrance. Even at this distance, Jake could tell this was someone important by how the guards straightened. The man moved with authority, like he owned every step. Jake adjusted his binoculars. Tall, muscular build, shaved head, probably mid-40s. The way he carried himself exuded confidence and competence, though not in a military way. Something else entirely. But it was his face that held Jake's attention. Pale, almost gray eyes, set deep in hardened features. His gaze was cold and analytical, dissecting everything and everyone in its path. It was the leader. It had to be. The guard's deference, his authoritative stance, the cold scrutiny he gave the incoming prisoners, like a farmer eyeing new livestock. Through his militia contacts, he'd heard rumors about a major crime syndicate that had been stockpiling military-grade equipment and building a network of loyal enforcers throughout the city. More troubling were the whispers about compromised police officers on their payroll. The speed of the police station's fall made more sense now, as did the spattering of blue uniforms amongst the rest of the armed men. They'd been undermined from within, long before the EMP hit. When the chaos started, this syndicate had been perfectly positioned to seize key infrastructure. The hospital was a natural step in a takeover, and he had no doubt that other vital infrastructure, like supermarkets and warehouses, had also been seized and secured. Jake reached into his backpack and pulled out a compact parabolic microphone, quickly sliding the earpiece into his left ear. He aimed it squarely at the leader, ready to catch every word. "Sir!" One of the patrol leaders approached Marcus, snapping a crisp salute. "Sector 7 secured. Minimal resistance. 14 assets acquired. 1 terminated during transport." Marcus nodded, seemingly pleased. "Medical personnel?" "None in this sweep, sir. Dr." The man glanced down at the paper he was holding. "Mandel's house was abandoned. Looks like he took his family and left." "That's fine. The ER doctor and nurse you grabbed last night are a good start." Marcus pulled out what looked like a tablet, probably protected from the EMP in a Faraday cage. "Who's next on the hospital staff list?" "Sir, we've identified 3 more high-priority targets from the Mount Sinai records that are in Sector 8. Most promising is," he handed over a paper, "Sarah Mitchell, former combat medic, 3 tours in Afghanistan, currently working ER at Mount Sinai. Address is 2247 Palmer Street." Jake's blood ran cold. They had her records. They knew exactly who she was, where she lived. In fact, they had driven right past her house, right past all of them in his home on their way back. It was dumb luck they'd been in a different sector. "Combat medic," Marcus smiled. "Those are rare, valuable. What's her status?" "Looks like she left the hospital right after the EMP, which means she evaded our first sweep team. Hopefully she's holed up at home." Marcus looked thoughtful. "Combat training makes her more dangerous than the average nurse, but also more useful. We'll need her skills for what's coming. Put her at the top of tomorrow's list. Sector 8 sweep, Palmer Street and surroundings. I want her taken alive. Rules of engagement, sir? Non-lethal if possible. But if she resists..." Marcus shrugged. Jake watched them discuss tactics, his mind racing. They were hunting and collecting people with medical training and using personnel records to find them. Why? What were they planning? A group of prisoners was led past his hiding spot, heading for what had been the stadium's medical center. 2 wore scrubs, but amongst the rest of the civilians, he spotted a man in mechanic's overalls. No, 2, one much younger. Clearly, they weren't only rounding up medical personnel. One thing they all wore in common as they shuffled past, though, were blank, defeated expressions. Several, both men and women, were badly bruised. Jake had heard and seen enough. He began backing away slowly, keeping to cover. The stadium was a fortress, but like all fortresses, it would also be a prison for those inside. And tomorrow, they planned to add Sarah to their collection. He moved faster once he was clear of the stadium's sightlines, working his way through side streets, avoiding the main roads where bodies and burnt-out cars told stories of violence and desperation. His mind raced with plans, escape routes, options. It was only by chance that he spotted her in the growing shadows between two cars. Mrs. Henderson lay crumpled against one of the car's bumpers, left hand still clutching her cardigan closed at her throat. Apart from the remnants of last night's brutality, there were no fresh signs of violence, no blood, no wounds, and if not for the ashen pallor of her skin and the faint bluish tinge around her lips, he might have thought her asleep. Jake knelt beside her, gently straightening her cardigan. She looked smaller somehow, all her stubborn pride and cheerful denial stripped away by death. A string shopping bag resting a few inches away from the fingers of her right hand gave him the only clue as to how she had ended up there. She must have ventured out for supplies, her mind still operating on the old rules of the world, expecting stores to be open, streets to be safe. Perhaps it was for the best that her heart gave out before she witnessed what the streets of her neighborhood, city, and country would become in the days ahead. He wanted to do more for her, give her some kind of proper burial, but there wasn't time. Sarah needed to know what he'd discovered at the stadium, and every minute he delayed put them all at greater risk. The best he could do was smooth her hair and tuck her hands carefully into her lap, trying to give her some small dignity in death. "I'm sorry," he whispered, standing. He forced himself to turn away. For now, he had to focus on keeping the living alive. They had to leave, tonight. Sarah's medical skills made her too valuable to these people. He'd seen the defeated looks on the captured and the bruises that spoke of convincing them to cooperate. That wouldn't happen to Sarah, or Devon. He wouldn't allow it. Jake checked his watch. He still had 20 minutes before Sarah would expect him back. But there was no time to waste. They needed to be packed and gone before first light. These people were too organized and too well armed to underestimate. As he moved through the broken city, Jake cataloged everything they'd need. Routes out of the city, supplies, places to hole up if worse came to worse. But more importantly, they needed a destination. The mountains, maybe, if they could get far enough into the wilderness. He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on moving fast, but carefully, through the ruins of his city. Planning could wait. First, he had to get back and warn Sarah. They had 12 hours until dawn. Sarah rose, firing as Devon sprinted for the stairs. 2 rounds into the kitchen doorway, forcing the flanking man back. 1 round through the broken window to pin the other man down. Devon's feet pounded up the stairs. Sarah backed up after him, maintaining fire, keeping both entry points covered. 9 rounds left in the magazine. The stairs seemed impossibly far. A flash of movement in the kitchen. Sarah fired twice. A cry of pain told her at least 1 round had found its mark. But now, the man outside was moving, using his partner's distraction to advance on the house. 3 stairs to go. 7 rounds left. An equation she didn't like. Sarah's back foot found the top step just as the front door burst open. She dove into the hallway as rounds chewed up the wall behind her. Rolling to her feet, she sprinted for Jake's room, where Devon had left the door open. More shots from below. They were coordinating again, trying to catch her in a crossfire. But they'd lost their element of surprise, and she knew the layout better than they did. Sarah slammed the bedroom door, throwing the reinforced lock. Devon huddled in the corner, exactly where she'd trained him to go in emergencies.
7 to base,
a radio crackled from downstairs.
We encountered hostiles. I can't raise Williams. Need immediate backup.
Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Let them think there were more defenders. It might buy them a few minutes. She checked her magazine. 7 rounds, plus 1 spare magazine. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but maybe enough to hold out until... Chapter 3. Visitors. Jake registered the broken window before he cleared the neighbor's hedge. Fresh glass glittered on the lawn like frost, gunfire still echoing in his ears. A man in tactical gear stood watching the front door, rifle ready. Amateur hour. He'd left his vehicle, exposed, no one watching his 6. His first instinct was to rush in, but he forced himself to pause, to analyze. Sarah was good. Her steady, controlled shots from inside told him that. More gunfire erupted, followed by a cry of pain. Not Sarah's voice. She'd hit someone. Jake ghosted through his own yard, years of training taking over. The man at the front was too focused on the broken window, hadn't checked his periphery. Sloppy. Jake crept closer.
Williams,
the man in front said quietly into his comms.
Status.
Radio silence. More gunfire from upstairs. Sarah, conserving ammunition. 3 shots, carefully placed. Jake smiled grimly. She was buying time, waiting for him. He saw the man click a button on his mic.
7 to base,
he said in a shaky voice.
We encountered hostiles. I can't raise Williams. Need immediate backup.
Jake crossed the open ground in 3 long strides. The man never saw him coming. One moment he was calling for backup. The next he was face down in the grass, Jake's knee in his back, rifle pressed against his skull.
Drop it,
Jake said quietly, or this gets messy. The man released his weapon, his body trembling beneath Jake's knee.
7, come in,
the radio squawked.
Report status.
Jake leaned closer to his prisoner's ear. Tell them you're clearing the scene. Tell them it was nothing. Do it right, you walk away from this. The man hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Jake pressed the rifle harder against his head.
7 to base,
the man finally said, voice remarkably steady despite his shaking hands.
False alarm. Scene clear. Just some kids running.
There was a long delay before a response came. When it came, the tone was markedly different.
Copy that, 7. Stand by for additional instructions.
Jake waited until the radio went silent.
Smart choice, but they didn't buy it. Now here's what happens next.
But the man was already moving, twisting, a blade glinting in his hand. Jake rolled sideways as the blade slashed where his throat had been. Amateur hour was over. They grappled in the grass, neither able to bring a weapon to bear. The man was strong and fought with desperation. The knife swept past his face. Jake trapped the arm, twisted it sharply, and felt something snap. The man screamed, and his blade fell from numb fingers. Jake ended it with 3 sharp punches. The man went limp. A noise from inside the house. Movement. Labored breathing. Williams. Jake zip-tied his unconscious prisoner and moved toward the broken window, keeping low. He could hear someone trying to drag themselves across the floor. Jake slipped through the window, glass crunching under his boots. A blood trail led from the stairs toward the kitchen. He followed it, weapon ready. Williams had managed to prop himself against the kitchen counter, his hand pressed against a bleeding wound in his side. His weapon lay just out of reach. His eyes widened when he saw Jake.
"Do it,"
Williams gasped.
"Just make it quick."
Jake studied him for a moment. "You get one chance, like your friend outside. Call it in. Tell them you're clear." Williams laughed, blood staining his teeth.
"You think I'm stupid? They already know something's wrong."
He lunged for his weapon. Jake's shot was precise. Williams slumped, eyes vacant.
"Sarah? Devin? We're clear?"
Sarah's voice, strong and steady, from upstairs. He found them in his reinforced bedroom. Devin launched himself into Jake's arms, trembling but trying to be brave as the two adults met each other's eyes.
"We have to go,"
they said simultaneously. Sarah nodded toward the window.
"How long until their backup arrives?"
15 minutes, maybe less. Jake was already moving, grabbing pre-packed bags.
"Marcus's men would have been sweeping this sector at dawn anyway, so we're just leaving early." "Marcus? I'll explain it on the way. Right now, we need to move, fast."
Sarah understood. She'd seen that look before, in Afghanistan, when one of their positions had been overrun and survival meant packing up and running.
"Devin, remember how we packed our emergency bags in the kitchen?"
she asked calmly.
"It's time to get them. Come on."
Sarah was already moving, one hand guiding Devin while keeping her Glock ready. But Devin froze in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the bullet holes in the wall. Sarah knelt before him, forcing him to look at her.
"Hey, remember what we talked about? When things get scary, we move. Moving keeps us safe. Can you do that for me?"
He nodded, still trembling but starting to focus. Good kid. Adapting. Jake appeared with a tactical backpack and his rifle case, and they headed down the stairs.
3 minutes,
he said quietly. Sarah grabbed the backpacks she'd packed her and Devin. She helped Devin put his on, and was shrugging her own on when Jake held up his hand suddenly. It was the rumble of a diesel engine approaching. Jake crossed to the window in 2 long strides, staying to the side as he peered out through his scope.
"Shit. Incoming. Single vehicle. Humvee."
His voice was tight.
4 men. Wait, make that 5.
Sarah joined him at the window, careful to stay hidden. The Humvee had stopped 2 houses down. 4 men emerged, moving with practiced ease and quiet purpose. The driver stayed behind the wheel. The last one to exit the vehicle caught her eye. He was big and moved like a cat, speaking quietly into the comms device on his shoulder.
"The big one is in charge,"
she whispered. Jake's hand tightened on his rifle.
"That's Marcus. He's the leader of this whole operation from what I saw."
He looked down at Devin, then met her eyes.
"We don't want to engage this group."
She nodded, understanding just by observing them that they would be a challenge, even if she and Jake didn't have Devin to protect. With an 8-year-old kid in tow, it would be a near impossible fight. They watched as Marcus directed his men with hand signals. 2 moved to flank the house while the others approached front and back. Standard tactical approach.
"The storm drain at the back of the yard," Jake said. "It's our only play."
Sarah nodded. She'd seen the heavy grate at the rear of Jake's sloping backyard during her prior sweeps of the property, noting the area around it was well maintained and clear of obstacles.
"Devin,"
she said calmly.
"Remember when we talked about adventures? This is going to be a big one, but you need to be very quiet, like a ninja mouse."
They moved into the hallway that led to the kitchen at the rear of the house. There was a yell of surprise from the side of the home. One of Marcus's men had found the cleanup crew behind the hedge.
"Sir, Chen is down. No sign of Williams."
Marcus's voice carried clearly.
"Enter the premises. Take the woman alive if possible. Anyone else is expendable."
Jake shouldered his rifle.
"Back door. Now."
They moved quickly but carefully down the hallway and into the kitchen.
Jake rushed to the back door and peeled the blind back quickly before letting it fall back into place. Target at 3 o'clock. The crunch of glass from the front of the house signaled that more of Marcus's men had entered through the front door. On 3, I'll lay down fire while you run for the drain, he whispered. The lid's heavy, but I keep it clean and oiled so it should open easily enough. We can lose them. Clear, came a call from the front room.
Randy, check upstairs, a deep, low voice ordered. They're here somewhere. I'll handle downstairs. Radio silence from here.
Jake looked at Sarah, then carefully unlatched the door. He counted off with his fingers. 1, 2, 3. Then pushed the door open, sprinting out while firing to the right as he went. Sarah grabbed Devon's hand and pulled him through the door, dragging the 8-year-old as she set off for the rear of the yard. His feet barely touched the ground. A distant shot rang out, and then all hell broke loose. The sounds of breaking glass and wild, untrained gunfire erupted, followed by screams and more shattering glass. "Contact front!" one of Marcus's men shouted from the other side of the house. "Multiple hostiles!" Sarah heard the unmistakable whoosh of Molotov cocktails igniting, followed by more frantic screams. Inside, Marcus ignored the new threat and moved quietly down the hall towards gunfire in the kitchen. "Sir," his driver's voice crackled in his ear, "it's locals, at least 6, and they're armed." Marcus's voice remained calm and professional. "Kill on sight, no prisoners." He entered the kitchen cautiously and approached the back door, spotting a woman and young boy running away from the house. He dismissed them as a burst of gunfire just outside the door caught his attention. The woman could be rounded up later. At the back door, he leaned out with a quick, practiced glance, scanning the chaos in a single heartbeat before pulling back into cover. In that fleeting moment, he saw the woman's accomplice crouched behind a woodpile, his back turned as he exchanged fire with one of Marcus's men positioned at the corner of the house. Marcus raised his gun, steadying it against the doorframe, and aimed between the man's shoulder blades. Sarah could tell from the sounds of gunfire which shots were trained and which weren't. Marcus's men fired in controlled bursts, while the gunfire of the new combatants, possibly neighbors or another gang, was sporadic and desperate. "Push them back!" a voice yelled, and she recognized the distinctive gravelly drawl of Mr. Peterson from 3 doors down. "Don't let them—" The rest was drowned out by a burst of automatic fire. Out of breath, she skidded to a stop when they reached the drain, pulling Devon down beside her. Behind, only the roof of the house was visible over the top of the slope they just careened down. She exhaled slightly, relaxing for a moment. Devon whimpered, and she patted his head. "You're okay. I need you to be brave now. Stay quiet, okay?" Without waiting for him to respond, she turned to the drain cover and slipped her fingers between the heavy steel grates, bracing herself and pulling. It didn't budge. Chapter 4. Run. Marcus's finger had begun to tighten on the trigger when the doorframe beside him exploded into splinters. He ducked and spun to face a big, beer-bellied man in a Stetson, racking a smoking shotgun. Without hesitation, Marcus dove right, firing as he moved. Bullets stitched across the man's chest, and he fell forward, his next blast tearing into the grass. Behind him, the sharp rattle of gunfire split the air, followed by a choked scream. Marcus spun around just in time to see his ally crumpling to the ground, while the stranger turned and brought his weapon to bear. Marcus dove through the doorway as rounds cracked past him. Jake cursed as the militia leader disappeared inside. He assessed the situation quickly. Mr. Peterson, the ex-sheriff he'd long ago marked as a reliable ally, lay face down yards away. Smoke billowed from the house front, punctuated by sporadic gunfire. With Peterson down, and Marcus joining his men, the fight wouldn't last long. A horrific scream cut through the air. A figure stumbled into view from the western side of the house, flailing, engulfed in flames. Jake recognized Stevie Scanlon, the high school senior from 3 doors down. "Shit, Stevie," Jake muttered as the kid collapsed, shrieking in agony. Jake didn't hesitate. Hesitation would only make this harder. He flipped the selector to single shot, steadied his aim, and pulled the trigger once. The shrieking stopped. After one final burst of gunfire and a scream from the front of the house, silence fell. Was it the ominous quiet of ended resistance, or simply the calm before another chapter of the battle? He wasn't going to hang around to find out. Jake grabbed the backpack he'd dropped during the firefight and was about to chase after Sarah and the boy when a flicker of movement caught his eye. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as she tugged on the drain cover with all her strength. It wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at her, but she forced herself to think. Devon clung to her arm, wide-eyed, his small body trembling. "Stay low, Devon," she whispered. "I just need 1 second." She scanned the yard and spotted a shovel propped against the fence. The gunfire had died away, leaving only an eerie silence in its wake. Her heart clenched as she thought of Jake. She had no idea if he was alive, but she couldn't afford to think about it now. Her priority was getting Devon to safety. "Stay here," she told him, her voice calmer than she felt. "I'll be right back." She darted across the yard, each step feeling like a lifetime, and snatched up the garden implement. Running back, she wedged the blade into the gap beneath the drain cover, gritting her teeth as she pressed down on the handle, trying to pry it open. The metal groaned, but held firm. With a surge of determination, Sarah pushed down harder, leaning her entire weight onto the shovel. The wood of the handle made a splintering sound, but finally the grate shifted slightly, and with a final heave she forced it up enough to get her fingers underneath. Grabbing the edge, she lifted it, revealing the dark opening below. "Go!" she hissed at Devon. He hesitated, staring down into the drain. "Now, Devon, climb down the ladder." Sensing the urgency in her voice, the boy finally scrambled into the narrow space and down the ladder built into the side. Sarah followed immediately, lowering herself in and pulling the cover down as best she could from the inside. The weight was tremendous, and she had to hold her breath to manage it, but she got it to settle back into place with a thud. That's when she heard running footsteps. She dropped to the floor of the shaft and put an arm around Devon and held a finger against her lips. Both barely breathing, they heard the footsteps pause directly above them. In the damp, shadowy silence of the drain, Sarah held Devon close, stripes of light falling across their faces, illuminating her determined eyes. Her finger was tight on the trigger of the raised pistol. Jake spun, bringing up his rifle before quickly lowering it. Tom Watson from number 12 stood at the corner of the garage, one hand raised in greeting. The other gripped a bloody baseball bat. His face was smeared with dirt and blood, his shirt torn and stained, and his eyes wild and excited. This wasn't the Tom Jake knew, the neat, mild-mannered accountant who always waved cheerfully and kept his yard immaculate. Jake gestured frantically for him to approach, but before his neighbor could move, a large shape materialized behind him. It was Marcus, a blade glinting in his hand. The knife swept across Tom's throat in one practiced motion, and his eyes widened. He crumpled. The hand he had raised to Jake now fixed against his throat, trying unsuccessfully to staunch the flow of bright, arterial blood spurting from the wound. Jake fired without conscious thought or proper aim. Marcus jerked backwards, blood blooming on his upper arm. He staggered but kept his feet and tried to take his rifle from his injured shoulder. Jake aimed more carefully this time and squeezed the trigger. A dry click. Their eyes met across the distance. Marcus's face twisted in rage at the sheer audacity of the failed attempt. He winced as he made a last effort to get his rifle into his hands. "Kill him!" Marcus roared to his men, his voice raw with pain and rage. "Take him down!" Jake was loath to let the man live, but if he did engage Marcus, it would take time to neutralize him, giving the other men ample opportunity to intervene. No, this was a battle better left to another day. He ran, shrugging on his backpack as he went. Behind him, Marcus screamed for his men again. He had made it 50 yards when the first shots cracked past him. He began to zigzag, crouching to make himself a smaller target. They were good, compensating for his movement, rounds walking closer with each stride. Jake ran full tilt toward the rear of the property where the yard sloped sharply down toward the storm drain. If he could make the slope before they got a clean shot. More weapons joined the first, 3 distinct sounds. The sharp crack of an M4, the deeper boom of a hunting rifle, the rapid bark of an MP5. Jake veered to the right, deliberately moving at an angle away from the location of the drain. The slope was still 5 yards away when a round slammed into his backpack. The impact was like being kicked by a donkey, the force lifting him off his feet. Jake tumbled through the air, his arms flailing for balance. He hit the slope hard, his body rolling and skidding down the incline. Dirt and dry grass scraped against his skin, the backpack cushioning his fall. For a moment, he lay still, stunned and breathless, heart hammering in his chest. He patted himself quickly. No blood, no sharp pain. The round hadn't punched through. Unharmed. He let out a shaky breath, glancing upward. Above the rise, the shooters were still firing, their rounds zipping harmlessly overhead. Jake's mind snapped back into focus. He pushed himself up and began running back to the left and towards the storm drain, keeping low. There wouldn't be time to catch his breath. Not yet. "Cut right!" one of them shouted. "Don't let him—" In the distance, he heard Marcus's enraged voice yell, "Take him alive!" Alive. Good. That meant his pursuers would be more cautious now. Behind him, 2 pairs of boots thundered towards the rise. The drain was still 50 feet distant. Sarah let out a pent-up breath when Jake's face appeared above the grate. His eyes locked onto hers with fierce urgency. Gunshots sounded in the distance as he slipped his fingers between the bars and heaved the cover up before dropping his gun and backpack down to her and clambering onto the top rungs of the ladder. He pulled the grate shut with a deafening clunk before reaching to his right. Sarah spotted a thick metal loop near the edge of the grate, an aftermarket edition, judging by the fresh, silvery weld. Jake grabbed the heavy 8-inch bolt that dangled beside it on a short chain and drove it through the loop with a firm shove. The bolt would catch on the frame if anyone tried to lift the grate from above, effectively jamming it in place. Dropping back to the ground, he grinned. Not exactly up to code, but they won't get that open. The drain tunnel stretched into darkness in both directions, just tall enough for Jake to stand, hunched over. Thin strips of light filtered through occasional grates above, creating islands of visibility in the gloom. The air hung damp and thick with the smell of rust and stagnant water. Devon pressed against Sarah's leg. "I don't like it down here." "None of us do, buddy," Jake said, expertly reloading his rifle. "But I know these tunnels, used to map them just in case." He pointed left. "That way leads downtown. Takes us to the river if we follow it all the way through. 3 miles, with lots of branches and outlets." Sarah nodded, understanding. Multiple escape routes if needed. Always have options. Angry voices echoed from above. Jake recognized Marcus's, tight with rage. Devon flinched at the sound. "River," Sarah whispered. Jake nodded. "Let's go." He took point, moving quickly but quietly through the shallow water. Sarah guided Devon between them, one hand on his shoulder. They moved fast, leaving their pursuers' frustrated voices behind. The tunnel felt endless, dark and claustrophobic, broken only by occasional shafts of light from above. After 2 turns and 40 minutes of walking, Jake held up his fist. Sarah pulled Devon close, listening. Faint splashing echoed from a side tunnel. Then silence. Was someone else down here? "Keep moving," Jake breathed. "Quiet as you can." The tunnel turned to the east, following the street above. More drains broke up the darkness with stark patterns of light and shadow. Devon was struggling, but stayed silent. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness as she thought of his mother, her sister, Patricia, taken by cancer less than a year ago. No 8-year-old should have to deal with losing a parent. Yet here he was, facing something that would affect them all, forever, if what Jake had heard about D.C. was true. They had just passed another grate when the rumble of engines above made them freeze. Multiple vehicles. Marcus's group. It had to be. And by luck, rather than good management, they were almost on top of them. "We need to move. Come on." Sarah jogged after Jake, pulling Devon along. They didn't stop until they'd put another 2 turns and at least a mile between them and the sounds above. Jake raised a finger to his lips. Over their ragged breathing, they heard no sounds of pursuit. Jake had just signaled they should move on when a splash echoed up ahead. He and Sarah raised their weapons, peering into the dimly lit tunnel. A single grate in the distance provided just enough light to see the junction ahead. A figure darted across the intersection. Jake quickly held up his hand. Whoever it was had been small, definitely not one of Marcus's men. They disappeared down another tunnel before either adult could get a clear look. Jake and Sarah exchanged glances. Others were using the tunnels too. Survivors, refugees, or something worse. 2 miles to the river, Jake said softly. Stay alert. We're not the only ones down here. They moved deeper into the darkness, leaving Marcus's search behind. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Maybe the hunt wasn't over. Maybe it had just moved underground.
Hey everybody, it's Scott here. Sorry for the interruption. I'll keep it brief because I know you'll want to get right back to Blackout Nation. I'm on a mission and I need your help to get there. We just reached a milestone of 40,000 subscribers on the channel, and my mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to help the channel hit 100,000 subscribers. To my knowledge, no single author audiobook channel has done that before, and with your support, we could make history. Subscribing is free, but it makes a huge difference. It boosts the channel, helps me reach more listeners, and ultimately, it allows me to create more audiobooks and exclusive content for you. So, if you're enjoying the channel and you're not yet a subscriber, please hit the button now. And if you are a subscriber, you can still help by sharing Hell Week, the first video in the America Falls series, with as many people as possible on your social media. I'll leave a link for easy sharing in the description. Thanks again for all your support, and now, back to Blackout Nation.
Chapter 5. Underground. They walked for what felt like hours, the monotony broken only by Devon's occasional stumbles and the distant sounds of the search continuing above. Jake led them through a maze of intersecting tunnels, each choice made with quiet confidence. Sarah had lost all sense of direction, but she trusted his movements. This wasn't his first time down here. The water level had risen slightly, now halfway to their ankles. The sound of their splashing, no matter how careful they tried to be, seemed to echo forever in the darkness. Sarah's thigh holster was soaked, and Devon's shoes made soft, squishing sounds with each step. "How much further?" she whispered. "River's close, maybe 20 minutes. Jake paused at another junction, checking markings on the wall that Sarah couldn't make out. "But we might have a problem. Besides the obvious ones? These tunnels drain into the river through a series of outflows. They'll have figured that out by now. Marcus seems like the type to think ahead." Sarah understood. They'd be watching the exits. "Are there any other options?" Before Jake could answer, Devon tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Aunt Sarah," his voice trembled, "someone's following us." Both adults spun, weapons raised. The tunnel behind them was empty, but Sarah had learned to trust Devon's instincts. Ever since he lost his mother, Devon had developed a strange sensitivity to the world around him. More than once he'd called out, "Someone's here," just moments before a knock on the door, or muttered, There's been an accident. Seconds before Sarah heard the faint wail of an ambulance siren. They stood motionless, straining to hear beyond the soft drip of water. At first, there was only silence. Then Devon tensed beside her, head tilted, as if picking up something beyond Sarah's reach. A faint splash echoed in that direction, then another, before silence blanketed the tunnel, broken only by the steady, rhythmic drip. "Good ears, buddy," Jake whispered. He gestured to a side tunnel. "This way. Quiet now." The passage he chose was narrower, forcing them to walk single file. Sarah kept Devon between them, one hand on his shoulder. The water was shallower here, but the air felt thicker, harder to breathe. Jake stopped so suddenly Sarah almost ran into Devon. She started to ask why when she heard it. Another splash. Closer now. Whoever was following had chosen the same tunnel. Jake pressed them against the tunnel wall, into the shadows. Sarah could feel Devon's heart racing as she held him close. Their pursuer was being careful, but not careful enough. Each splash, though faint, gave away their position. 10 yards away. 8. 5. Jake's rifle inched upward, his finger tightening on the trigger. A dim shaft of light from a grate they had passed under 30 yards back briefly illuminated their stalker. Sarah's breath caught. It was a girl, maybe 15 or 16, wearing a once bright yellow coat, now faded and smeared with grime. She moved with a wary grace, her gaze darting over her shoulder as if she'd spent a lifetime in hiding. She was nearly 10 feet away when the day outside brightened as a cloud revealed the sun, allowing more light into the tunnel. She saw them, her eyes widening in surprise, and in that charged silence, no one dared to move. Suddenly she spun on her heels, ready to run. "Wait!" Sarah started to call, but Jake's hand clamped over her mouth. More splashing echoed from the main tunnel, heavier this time. Multiple sets of boots moving with purpose. Marcus's men had found their trail. The girl heard it too. She looked back at them, then at the junction ahead, indecision clear on her face. Sarah could almost see her calculating the odds of escape alone versus trusting strangers. Jake slowly lowered his hand from Sarah's mouth and pointed to a spot high on the tunnel wall, a maintenance alcove, almost invisible in the shadows. The girl followed his gesture, then nodded once. They moved as one, Jake boosting first Devon, then Sarah into the alcove, before helping the girl. He pulled himself up last, just as flashlight beams began sweeping the tunnel below. The alcove was barely big enough for all of them. Sarah held Devon against her chest, his face pressed into her shoulder to keep him quiet. The girl huddled beside them, her yellow coat rustling slightly until Jake put a steadying hand on her shoulder. Her trembling subsided, but her eyes remained huge in the darkness, reflecting the occasional flash of light from below. Boots splashed through the water beneath them. Sarah counted at least 4 distinct patterns, professional and measured, not the chaotic searching of amateurs. A flashlight beam swept upward, and she held her breath as it passed just inches from their hiding spot. Jake's hand tightened imperceptibly on his rifle. "Clear here," a voice called, echoing off the tunnel walls. Marcus's voice crackled through their radios, tight with barely controlled rage. "Keep moving. Work the grid pattern we discussed. They have to be heading for the river outflows." "Sir," another voice responded from below. "These tunnels branch off dozens of times. They could be anywhere by now." "Then we check everywhere," Marcus's voice growled. "Tunnel by tunnel. I want that medic. And Svensson, if you find the male target, soften him up as much as you want. But I want him alive." Jake felt Sarah tense beside her. "Outflows are covered, sir. Nothing comes out without us seeing it." "Good." A pause, then. "Rodriguez, take your team east. Svensson, continue north. I want updates every 10 minutes. If they're down there, they'll surface eventually." The boots moved on, splitting up at the junction. Their flashlight beams created crazy patterns on the tunnel walls as they departed in different directions. Sarah waited until the splashing had faded before releasing her breath. Beside her, the girl did the same. "They're hunting you?" the girl whispered. So quiet, Sarah barely heard her. "They're hunting all of us now," Jake replied softly. "Got a name?" "Maya." She glanced nervously after the search parties. "I've been down here since yesterday. They're taking people. Anyone with skills they need. My parents—" She trailed off, swallowing hard. "They took them first because they're Russian. Said they needed translators. I haven't seen them since." "Translators? Why?" asked Jake. The girl shrugged. "We should move," Sarah said, mind racing. "They'll double back eventually." Jake nodded. "We'll have to find another way out, now that they have the river covered. We'll stop at the next street drain and scope it. If it's clear, we'll be out in the open. So we'll have to be quick and find cover ASAP." "I know another way out that might be safer," said Maya. "Where?" Jake asked. "Mount Sinai Hospital," Maya whispered. "There's a maintenance access that leads to the basement." Sarah tensed at the mention of her workplace. "The hospital's not safe. I've been in there," Maya cut in. "They're letting what's left of the staff tend to the patients who were already in there under guard. But the basement's clear. I slept there last night. There's food down there, and supplies they missed. And," she looked at Devon, who was starting to shiver, "it's dry." Jake and Sarah exchanged glances. The hospital would have medical supplies, maybe food. A gunshot followed by a scream echoed up and down the tunnels. They all jumped, and Devon whimpered. "That was close," Maya said urgently. "Please, I can show you." Sarah nodded at Jake's unspoken question. "Lead the way," he said finally. "This way. Stay close to the wall. It's easier to move without splashing." If either of the adults took exception to this obvious instruction, they didn't let on. Jake fell in behind Maya, followed by Devon, who was ushered along by Sarah. Their progress was slow but steady. Maya moved with practiced stealth, each step carefully placed to minimize noise. The water seemed to grow deeper, and the smell of decay stronger. Sarah tried not to think about what might be decomposing in the stagnant pools. Devon stumbled, and Sarah caught him before he fell. His shoes and pants were soaked through now. She could feel him shivering. "How much further?" she whispered. "2 more turns," Maya said softly. "But this next part, we have to be extra quiet. It goes under the parking lot, and they have guards there." "How many?" asked Jake. "I counted 4 last night, all armed." He nodded, impressed. They turned a corner and saw daylight streaming down through the small grate. She looked back and put a finger to her lips as they crept towards it. She stopped 3 feet short and turned again, before making a very clear gesture by running the 2 fingers of her right hand along the upper part of her left forearm, then pointing to each of them in turn, beginning with herself. They nodded. She swiveled and tensed, about to take her turn scrambling past the drain when a shadow passed over the grate, accompanied by voices. Everyone froze as a beam of light shone into the drain and swept the darkened periphery. Maya made herself as small as possible as the beam brushed past her. "Waste of time. They're heading for the river, not back toward—" "Orders are orders. Check every tunnel within 6 blocks. So stupid. Isn't it just 2 people? Listen, they killed one of our men, and Schmidt told me the same guy wounded Marcus. But hey, if you want to radio Marcus and tell him it's stupid, be my guest. Forget it. Anyway, this one's all clear. Come on, man, you have to lift the grate." Jake quickly gestured Maya should come to them. She moved swiftly and quietly, and together they scrambled back around the last corner they'd turned. They pressed against the tunnel wall, barely breathing, as they heard the bump and scrape of the cover being removed and dragged to the side. Flashlight beams lit up the area they'd just abandoned before sweeping back the other way. Devon buried his face in Sarah's side. "Ah, Christ, it stinks," moaned voice one. "No way I'm going down there. The goddamn thing is empty." "Shit, that's bad," said voice two. "Fine, it's clear. Put the grate back and we'll check the one in the street." They heard the grate slam back into place and the voices faded away. They all relaxed. "Funny. I don't think it smells that bad down here," said Jake with a grin. "Yeah, I guess you get used to it," Sarah agreed. "You do," said Maya. "We should go." They passed under the parking lot grate one by one. Then the tunnel curved sharply left, then right. Sarah had lost her bearings again, but Maya moved with certainty. "There," she said, pointing at 5 rungs set into the wall. At the top was a rusty metal hatch with a lever handle. Jake dropped his gear and climbed the rungs. Despite the rust, the hatch opened easily. He peered into the room beyond, then, when he was satisfied it was clear, dropped back to the floor of the tunnel. Maya went first, moving with practiced ease up the metal rungs. Sarah helped Devon follow, then she followed him. Jake put his backpack on, then shouldered his rifle and brought up the rear, closing the hatch behind him once he was through. The maintenance room smelled of oil and bleach. Jake's flashlight revealed shelves of abandoned tools and electrical equipment. A thick layer of dust covered everything except a narrow path along the floor. "This way." Maya led them behind a row of tall lockers, where she had created a living space, hidden from the door's sightline. "Home sweet home," Maya whispered, pulling a battery-powered lantern from behind a crate. The soft light revealed her hideout's careful organization. 2 thin mattresses salvaged from somewhere lay against the wall. Supplies were arranged in neat rows. Canned food, medical supplies, batteries, even clean clothes. Most impressive were the 3 one-gallon jugs of water, carefully dated with a marker. "Smart setup," Jake murmured, examining her security measures. Heavy wrenches had been positioned to jam the door. Pieces of broken mirror were angled to see around corners. "Multiple exits?" Maya nodded, pulling a folded paper from her coat. "The hatch, plus stairs at the rear to the main basement. As far as I can tell, no one even comes down here anymore." A thud from above made them all freeze. Footsteps from the floor above crossed the ceiling, accompanied by muffled voices. Maya calmly reached up and dimmed the lantern. They waited in tense silence until the sounds faded. "That's normal," she said. Sarah blinked, eyes wide, then smiled. You did all this? How did you know to do it?" Maya laughed. "Aftermath." "What? Aftermath?" "The survival game?" Jake asked, surprise evident in his voice. Maya nodded. 5,000 hours. My parents hated it, said I was wasting time. But it teaches you everything. Sightlines, resource management, patrol patterns. She gestured to her setup. The mirror trick? Standard tactic for monitoring hostile NPCs. And keeping supplies elevated, sorted by priority, that's just basic inventory management. Devon's face lit up. "Oh, that's like in Minecraft. I build forts and keep all my stuff in chests, so the creepers don't get it." He looked at Maya with wide eyes. "Is that what you're doing?" "Sure is, buddy." "A video game taught you all this?" Sarah asked. "Yeah," Maya said. "My team was ranked 3rd globally before." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "Anyway, the skills transferred, especially the stealth mechanics. The bad guys in the hospital, they're just badly programmed NPCs. Predictable patrol routes, limited sight range, terrible situational awareness." Jake nodded appreciatively. Gaming is tactical training. The military's been doing it for years. So, your parents, you were saying they were taken? Sarah asked. Yeah, the dumb thing is, we always had a secret stash of food, and Dad set up the basement to be a safe room. They always thought America might collapse into a civil war. Jake nodded, shrugging off his backpack and resting it beside the rifle he'd propped up against the shelving. Can I ask why they didn't use it? The safe room? It happened too fast. Dad was out on the road and Mom didn't want to shut us in without him. When he did come home, it was with a bunch of goons. Mom told me to hide. There was a hitch in the girl's voice, but she didn't cry. Sarah took a step towards her, but the girl turned and busied herself making up the mattresses. The woman didn't take offense. Devon claimed the first mattress Maya finished, his eyes heavy. Sarah helped him out of his wet shoes and socks, using a clean T-shirt from Maya's supplies to dry his feet. The boy was nearly asleep when Maya brought him a candy bar. Here, she said. Sometimes candy helps with the scary stuff. Devon studied her for a moment before breaking the bar in half and offering her part. Maya's surprise was visible even in the dim light. She took it with a small smile, and they ate in companionable silence until Devon drifted off. Maya glanced at Sarah. He's a good kid, she whispered. You've done a great job with him. You look so young. How old were you when you had him? Sarah's eyes widened. The girl's directness made her seem far older than her years. Smiling softly, she brushed a hand over Devon's hair before responding. I'm not his mom. He's my nephew. Oh. Maya's cheeks flushed faintly. I thought he was... sorry. Sarah gave a small, understanding smile, though her eyes were clouded. His mom, my sister, she died 9 months ago. The girl nodded, a sad look on her face. Jake grabbed his pack and rustled around in it before pulling out 2 plain wrapped food bars. You should both eat. These will keep you full. They're packed with calories. Have them with water. He unwrapped one for himself and took a position near the door, seated with his back against the wall, his rifle across his knees. Sarah didn't realize how hungry she was and wolfed the bar down. Maya ate half of hers, then rewrapped it and slid it into the pocket of her coat, before taking it off and folding it neatly. Get some rest, he told them. I'll wake you in 4 hours, Sarah. Sarah knew she should sleep, but her mind was racing. She sat beside Jake instead, watching Maya curl up near Devon, the girl leaving the other mattress free for the adults. They were quiet for a long time, listening to the children's steady breathing. What do you think this Marcus wants? She asked Jake when it was clear the girl was asleep. Building his kingdom. Jake's voice was hard. First thing any warlord needs is medical personnel, especially now. He paused. You've seen it before. Afghanistan. Tribal leaders, local militias. Same pattern. Control the weapons, food, and doctors. Control the population. She studied his profile in the dim light. What aren't you telling me about what you saw today? Marcus isn't just grabbing people randomly. He's got lists, records, and those men of his. Some are former military. He shifted, checking the door again. Before all this, I'd heard rumors of a big protection racket in the industrial district. It had fingers in everything, construction, shipping, even hospital suppliers. It's got to be him who was running it. That's probably how he got those personnel records so fast. He shook his head. Not like he planned for this exactly, but guys like him, they're always ready to exploit a crisis. He already had the manpower, the territory, even radio gear for coordinating his crews. When everything went dark, he just adapted. More footsteps crossed above them, closer this time. A door creaked somewhere in the darkness beyond their hideout. Sarah's hand moved to her weapon, but Jake touched her arm, shaking his head. The sounds faded. "We need to get these kids out of the city," Sarah said quietly. "Yeah." Jake checked his watch. "But not tonight. Tonight we rest, plan. The storm is only going to get worse, and this might be our last chance to breathe for a while." Sarah felt the weight of his words, the truth in them. She looked at Devon and Maya, sleeping peacefully despite everything. Two children from different worlds, brought together by chaos, finding comfort in each other's presence. "We'll protect them," Jake said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Sarah met his eyes, saw something there that made her look quickly away. In the distance, gunfire echoed through the city. But here, in their small sanctuary, surrounded by Maya's careful preparations, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. Morning would come soon enough, and with it, decisions that would change everything. "I'll sleep. Wake me in 4, said Sarah.
The end of Episode 2, Darkness Descends. Written by Scott Medbury. Narrated by Adam Barr.
If you're enjoying Scott's audiobook content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.